and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together with their randomly designed, randomly articulated, artistically created, thought over, some would say possibly deity-inspired story elements, and we combine them together in order to make a story that will stand the test of time. If this is 1,000 years from now, don't worry, everyone, we made it. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. So I think we need a I was going to say a prolapse, but that's the wrong word. We need a synopsis of last week's because we're continuing on. Reed, do you want to do that?
Yeah, because I got goal.
Oh, perfect.
What do you guys have?
I have unique weapon.
I have famous person.
Okay. Well, last week we started this story and Seth led off with history. And it was a story about in the distant past, the society had been very technologically advanced and huge strides had been made, particularly in the use of artificial intelligence. And they, it was for convenience. Everything was becoming more and more streamlined, and it had some great advantages for productivity and advance of, quality of life and everything. But there was some unintended consequences. And at first, there was just, a few people started saying, hey, wait a minute. Like, we're raising up a generation of kids that doesn't even understand what, the artificial intelligence is doing. And we're losing our capabilities to just do normal functions. And they were pretty much, it didn't catch on because it was too comfortable to just go along. But then it became undeniable that there were some actual unintended consequences that had scientific backing. And like children's brains were affected. Literally, people started losing mental faculty. And so it was just to save the human race, really, that they had to wean themselves off this dependence on this high tech. And it became, in order to get everybody on board, it became kind of like I don't know how they could have done it, but there was a character that kind of did the main job of like writing, the writings that the new look at things were going to kind of follow. And it became kind of like the basis of almost a religious order to society. And it became very regimented where people were they had, society was locked down. You were pretty much stuck in what you were born into. And that had just become a kind of a consequence of having to develop this new way of doing things, which was actually kind of hearkening back to the old way of doing things. And people, here, like generations later, people were trying to follow the rules, but kind of push the limits, But one of the things that was happening is that there were fantastic advances in certain human capabilities and the ability of human beings to specialize. And that came across as people began to understand how the brain works. Like back in the day, the Army especially started using IQ tests to figure out where people would be best suited.
Yeah.
And so that kind of way of thinking, testing of kids for early on for what kind of capabilities they had became a kind of thing. And Levi's story element was the hero, and Wilson, at the point of our story, is 28 years old, and he had tested at 5 years old to have this really spectacular ability, the ability to separate and catalog all input. He had total recall, was cognitively enhanced, and he could access stored information at in his brain at a blindingly fast clip. And the way Levi explained it, it was like everything that came into his brain, images, things he heard, it was all laid out on like a white table. He could just see it all. And then when he needed it, he could just look at the table, imagine it when he had gotten it, and it would be there, and he would be able to access that information. And so then the idea is that kids that tested in this way would be trained to be take the place of computers and artificial intelligence and be able to fill that gap in what industrialization required, and whatnot. However, there was a traumatic event when the kid was just like, Wilson was only like 10 years old. There had been a violent break-in, and I didn't get whether it was just a robbery or whatever it was, but he saw both his parents brutally killed. And he went into kind of like an 8-month trauma-induced like shock reaction. And during that time, his brain, he couldn't shut off his brain. He just kept remembering the trauma of it over and over. And when he came out of this coma, he just was a mess. There are defense mechanisms that kicked in to protect him from going back into that loop that he was stuck in. And so then, the promise of his early development had sort of gotten short-circuited.
Right.
And so he had to, it kind of came out like, short-term memory impairment. He actually had really good short-term memory. It's just that he had to consciously choose to move input into his long-term memory. And it was complicated. And he would, like I said, he was kind of a mess. He was really depressed, and he was undisciplined. He was self-medicating. He was
a child.
Yeah. And here he was. So it was kind of with the backdrop there. And one of the things he's trying to find a way. He was kind of overweight. He was using food to medicate, whatever, not keeping himself in shape, not disciplined. And he had been encouraged by people to try to get in shape, and just.
Yeah, this is now 18 years later, where he's like, the government's pretty much done with him because he isn't showing anything.
Right. And he just wasn't interested in any kind of like exercise routine, but he decided to try mountain biking. So he was on doing that, and he was on a trip. He was on a bike trek in a mountainous area where they had trails, and he just decided to go off trail just because it'd be interesting and fun, right? And he was, pushed it a little too hard, and he ended up having a terrible accident. Went off like an escarpment, and he was able to keep from being killed by like breaking his fall along these huge spruce trees with springy boughs. So he was able to break his fall. So by the time he landed, he had a bad break, and he had a couple of other bad injuries, and he probably would have died. But here's the random insert element that I had, and it was a Bigfoot rescue mission. So the random insert is that Bigfoot is real. And there was a family of Bigfoot. There was a Pacific Northwest, and they kind of liked
that area of the world. And they found this poor guy, and against their better judgment, because they like to stay clear of human civilization, they took him back to their camp, which was really carefully camouflaged and hidden from prying eyes and everything, and nursed this guy back to health. Well, one of the things that he noticed that he had a hard time, he thought something was wrong with his vision because they just seemed like they couldn't see him. And then they explained, well, we're slightly out of phase because we're not from your dimension. We just come here for vacation. We like the hunting, the fishing, gathering berries, and we have the ability, if we're near a powerful enough energy source, we can phase into your dimension, and we can have kind of a recreative time, and then we can just phase back. And anyway, so this was this process that he went through. He was rescued and kind of nursed back to health. So then he had the prospect of, finding his way back out of the wilderness and rejoining society, and having to make the decision. Well, do I tell people, I was rescued by Bigfoot? That would sort of, if the government was done with them before, it certainly would be done with them now. and of course, Bigfoot hunters had been largely, discredited because they could never find any evidence because, when they come to look for him, Bigfoot's just gone. Right.
But anyway, so now for this episode, the story element I drew was goal, and I thought that the goal of the story is a study of true heroism. How someone could overcome seemingly debilitating personal obstacles to meet challenges, and then so kind of an unlikely hero that a lot of people had kind of dismissed as maybe not so useful,
Right.
is put into a position where he has to rise to the tasks set before him. And just, you know what? I don't know. I'm not confident that I have the ponies to pull this wagon, but the wagon's going to have to get pulled, and it's necessary. So I'm going to have to pull myself together and meet what's facing us. So how do you like that for a goal? A study of the true heroism, Wilson's challenge.
Sounds good to me. Seth, what story element did you have again?
I had famous person.
Do you want to go next, or do you want to hear the unique weapon?
I'll go next. It has a little bit of an extension onto part of the history.
Okay.
Just as a different, part of the society. One of the famous people of the past that rose up and was probably one of the prominent figures, and then when kind of all the dust settled, he was like happy that they won, like their end goal had kind of been accomplished, but he himself felt that it didn't go far enough. And one of the things that he had the ability of is that, like I mentioned in the episode before, there are people like myself that can't wear a watch. It'll stop working.
Right.
Basically the idea of someone that can emit a small electromagnetic pulse. And this guy, Arcos, is his name, and he had that. However, in the aftermath of that, of course, this was kind of religiousized, so he kind of took over more of like an inquisitorial, what would that be? An inquisition branch of kind of the
whatever this new
that.
whatever this new religion was called.
And so he, with, let's say, the power, like say, granted his order, kind of would take it upon themselves to kind of seek out and then destroy certain things that they felt were too far along or not in the proper mindset, and they could do so by basically emitting small electromagnetic pulses that would eliminate electronic.
So all of them could?
In there.
Or
not
did they like develop?
Some of them. I think some of them. And as it has developed, there's like so he would have created an order that you had to have at least some of this to begin with. And then
selective
you
breeding.
Could only marry within the order.
Yeah.
And so by now you have people that, let's say, can, like, just their presence will,
sort of disrupt. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in general, it's not like there's a lot of these people, but they harken back to this guy Arcos, and what he would have started, and they kind of act like a lot of them could act kind of vigilante,
right?
Child. This doesn't,
or really vindictive,
kind of. So that is the famous person and what he has kind of wrought into the world. So sometimes you might
Saint Arcos.
So is this like, like one of the questions I remember the timetable, like this was like, did you say this was like a couple thousand years, or like
it could be a couple thousand years, maybe.
Is this Arcos? Is he like a descendant of the original, one of the original leaders?
Or Arcos is the famous guy, and then
Arcos is the famous guy. So right now, like as far as like the religious order that kind of runs the world, like they people have their saints now, like Saint Paul and Peter, and the different places, people that have saints, or like the high prophets or something like that. He'd be someone like that. It's a household name, because he's a kind of a founding member of the kind of the religious and thought order that everyone lives by now. And his order that he would have put together is centered around what has normally run the Inquisition hand, or has been the inspiration of, let's say, Robin Hood type vigilantes that, take it upon themselves to, go the utmost to make sure that things like this don't happen again.
Right.
So some people could just be, let's say, terrorists, but then there is a group of people that have, let's say, selectively bred this ability inside of their order to basically be like magnetic pulse disruptive entities, really.
And I'm guessing that maybe in this story they haven't seen a lot of action in the last couple hundred years, so whatever happens in this story, the villain could come out of this thing, the hero's sidekick could come out of this thing, we could be looking at a redemption story, we could be looking at a lot of different stuff coming out of that's cool. So I'm reading the God Emperor of Dune right now. So my unique weapon is going to be semi also Dune related, just like my thing was semi also Dune related last week. The unique weapon is truth. As humanity has sort of had to abandon computers and systems of that nature, as they have had to start rote memorizing, performing a lot of the same functions, instead of sort of sinking back into a more kind of mystical way of viewing the world, because of this order and the way that they function, and because like a lot of technology has kind of the mystical sense into it, a lot of the teaching of this religion is you need to know what's going on, you need to understand what's happening. Don't use a machine if you can't open it up and understand it. Society has shifted into a place where even psychologically, truth makes sense and lies do not make sense. Where even psychologically, if you present an argument that isn't based in reality, people typically won't sort of pick it up and run with it, because at least if it doesn't sort of confirm any biases that they already have. There's this thought process that if we were able to teach a large population to code, we could present information and it would be sort of broken down and understood a lot quicker, because of how programmers have to format their brains in order to take in information. And that's a bit of what's happened, especially since everyone's being tested and trained from a very young age to see if they can fit into this sort of human computer brain thing that the government and the religions really have and value. So the unique weapon is the truth. If you are able to walk in the truth 100% of your time, you sort of there's like a timbre to your voice. I think, Reed, you have heard this, and Seth, you're reading the Lightbringer series now, but in it, one of the characters talks about how an oath is you're drafting your own will.
Right.
And if you break an oath, then you lose that bit of your will. You've given up.
Right.
Right? So truth walkers or truth speakers are people who have dedicated decades of their life to living, speaking only in the truth. Most people are jaded to truth, where on a whole they can be deceived, right? Most people, if they concentrate on something, the errors of it will start to come out, but that's just kind of how it is in normal life already,
Right.
But there are people who have dedicated their minds and their bodies and their thought processes to truth, and they sound different. Their voices sound different, and people don't understand why. They think it's because, oh, it's another religious order. Oh, it's a special training. It's magic. They are AIs. They're directed by a satellite. You know, people think and people estimate it's a lot of different things, but what it really is it's the fact that they have never lied for convenience. They've never deceived in order to get anything. They have dedicated themselves solely to the place of honesty. Old people understand them more than young people do. Old people, as they sort of shed the responsibilities of life and shed the sort of the images of life, like I have to perform X amount in order for people to think great of me, they start to get that timbre in their voice, some do anyways, as they are able to sort of let go of parts of their life that they have before needed to protect themselves in. And these people not only have learned through the years to speak the truth, but they have also learned to see the truth, you know? So looking at a person, they can guess how old they are based on how they carry themselves. They can ask them a few questions and glean information and hear things inside their voice, you know, changes in pitch based on what they're saying. And so they're employed by royalty, by businessmen to sit in on diplomacy issues, to sit in on, business contracts, right? The only thing that you have to understand when you employ a truth speaker or seer is that they have to be given the right and the ability to speak everything that they hear to point out what is the truth and what is not.
Cuts both ways. So if you're trying to run a scam, you're probably not better off not hiring one.
Yeah. Now, they haven't been deceived but a few times. You know, really slimy people who, you know, spend a long time sitting in the truth, but just on the edge and sort of skirting around issues, you know. So they're not infallible, but they are pretty, or people who have been trained by them who have then went on to become, you know, who've been trained to become, who have then left the order in order to sort of become a criminal, are able to sort of timbre their voice in certain ways to deceive them, just kind of that whole thing.
I just had this image of, while you were talking, well, there's not much room in this society for, like, the guy with the checkered coat. Come down to Big Al's Used Cars. We'll get you in a car. We'll find the best deal for you, you know. I mean, yeah, the carnival barker, you know, right. Step right up.
Or, you know, yes, there is, you know, and he just kind of closes up shop when the truth sayer comes, or truth speaker comes into town. I was
thinking, like, it'd be kind of a nice society to, like, raise a daughter, you know, because, like, you just have the truth guy when he comes around, you know, to escort your daughter out for an evening of joy and frivolity. You know, you just have the truth speaker,
designated chaperone.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and they could also be people who, like, you know, do weddings. You know, I was thinking like a speaker for the dead kind of instance as well.
Yeah, that reference is from Orson Scott Card's, the Ender Game series. You mentioned, like, last time that one of the inspirations for this notion of dedicated people trained to do, you know, to perform the task formerly made by computers that could process information really fast and have accurate recall, was like the Mentat from Dune.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I was thinking about it, I thought about Heinlein had a story from the 50s, like Revolt in 2100, and he had a society that was very rigid, and they had people trained up to be specialists in certain things, and then they had people trained up to be generalists that would keep the big picture and everything. And then they had this middle category called the synthesis that would specially train, just like you're talking about, with that they could keep the big picture, but also handle the detail of the specialist and just keep all of that incredible amount of data at his fingertips, so that they would, each like the ruling class had to keep a few of these synthesis on retainer in order to make things work.
And so what I'm thinking is that Wilson comes down from the mountain after recovering, right? The what's it called? The Sasquatch send him off. He comes down the mountain. He's not missed at all.
Yeah.
Right? His apartment has been...
When he gets back.
Yeah, his apartment...
Everyone says, Wilson, put a veil over your face. It's too bright.
Yeah. No, he comes back. His apartment has been cleaned out, and it's now being rented by someone else.
No.
It's been like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
He's like... And he, after, being away from the junk food and being away from the ability to serve himself and really having to dedicate himself to becoming better. I'm not going to say that he's completely cured, but the Sasquatch definitely teach him the value of a hard day's worth of work and the peaceful tranquility of nature. And so he definitely comes back and he wants to be better now, right? He is not cured by any stretch of the imagination, but he wants to be better. He's no longer sort of satisfied with just his government pension and wasting away, And so I'm trying to think, what I'm thinking of is somehow he gets in some trouble, right? Maybe he owes back rent or something all of a sudden. Maybe one of the reasons why he goes on this big adventure in the first place is because the government was going to stop paying for his apartment.
Okay.
And was essentially going to start charging him rent. And so he owes them like a month of rent. And so he goes in to sort of tell his story, And of course, there's a truth speaker there, and he goes in and tells his story. And the truth speaker is like, everyone's like, come on, stop lying. And they all kind of look at the truth speaker, and the truth speaker's like, yeah, he's telling the truth.
So there is Bigfoot.
And they're like, and so they sort of, my thought is that they sort of have like a back and forth where the truth speaker doesn't actually believe that he's telling the truth. And she like looks at his information, like his records, and it's like, oh, he was a candidate for one of these guys.
Yeah.
But he's been kind of knocked out. And we haven't been able to find one of these human computers that is functioning, that isn't like buried deep in government conspiracy and protection.
Right.
So she basically makes a ruling that she thinks he's lying, but in order for him to prove right, she's going to put him on probation, and she's going to give him a truth speaker to follow him around.
Oh, cool.
Right, for 30 days or something.
Mm-hmm.
And this truth speaker this new one is just having just graduated and given I imagine them in like yellow robes. Like kind of like burnt orange. Not burnt orange, but like kind of a mustard yellow kind of robe. And it's like, okay.
Like they'd be happy in Tibet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. And so it's like, follow him around, and he has to not speak one intentional lie for 30 days.
Cool.
And if he does, then we can yank him in and, we can prosecute him. But their effort is, the reason why they're going through such an effort is because they want to study him, and they want to figure out, because they don't trust this new thing that has been emerging. They don't trust it. And then maybe someone from the who follows the Saint, what is it, Argos, Seth? Arcos. Maybe someone who follows Saint Arcos, like from that sect, finds out that the truth speaker is going to be following around this defunct. I'm trying to figure out what to call him. I love the word mentat, but I don't want to use that because.
Yeah.
But this defunct super specialist, and kind of attaches themselves to their group as well, in an effort to kind of figure out, because they think that they're pretty sure that the truth speakers are like either they are robots or they're sort of powered by some other, how else do they?
RIs. I don't know if that's an acronym for anything else, but if AI is artificial intelligence, these people could be like RIs, real intelligence.
Yeah,
because they're filling some of
RIs.
the same role.
That kind of works.
I like that. Yeah, good.
So, that's kind of what I was thinking. That would be like not the beginning of the story, but like kind of at the middle when the quest begins. So you have striking out this Wilson who's trying to figure out, what it means to be a hero, or what it means to be good. And then this truth speaker who's kind of like watching him his every move. And then you have this inquisitor from the Inquisition of Archon watching both of them, not really convinced that either of them are quite religious enough.
Yeah.
I like it. Any interesting points to add, Seth?
No, not really.
So what's the next step then? Wilson is like learning how to keep his natural defense mechanism from kicking in when he doesn't want it to, so that he can catalog information, catalog input, kind of on command, but without triggering the avalanche of traumatic memory.
Right.
So maybe I've got a quest for him. Here's just an idea that came into my head. They have to like some quest, and maybe we can figure out how this comes up. But he has to go deep into the jungle rainforests of the Midwest, because with the rise of technology and greenhouse the stuff that goes on today, some of the same kind of things. Let's say greening or treeing, like the tree planting thing. Reforestation took over, the Midwest. So everything that would be considered, the plains, is now like a really dense, rainforest. And there's something that they have to find at the center of there.
Right.
What it is, I don't know. Maybe someone needs unique artifact.
Or maybe it could also be that Wilson decides that what he needs to do is he needs to join the truth speakers, right? And that's how he gets a person watching him.
Oh, yeah.
And they have to basically go out to do something, maybe to go to this shrine or whatever out in the middle of nowhere. And that's like the first step. And he has to not speak an intentional lie for like a year. So not like a month, but like a year, and we could even back that up by saying Wilson could be like a habitual liar, not a habitual liar, I don't remember. It's a specific word. It's a person who lies on instinct, regardless of outcome. They lie whether or not it would help them or not. He could be like that. And
not a kleptomaniac is someone who just
steals stuff. Yeah.
Help stealing, but no.
Yeah, filling in, like covering up the gaps in his memory. He'll just make crap up.
Right.
Like it was a defense mechanism to just not go through the pain of having to explain that he just doesn't know. So he'll just like develop this defense mechanism to just get by socially.
Yeah.
And develop the
you talk about my life, or
easier to lie than didn't mean to do that. But
no, I know.
I know something about that too.
Yeah. So he's kind of striking out on this adventure or journey with this truthsayer, and then Inquisitor of the whatever of Archon is also there.
Pathological liar, impulsive liar.
Impulsive liar. That's what I was thinking of. Lying on impulse rather than like deciding to lie. Anyways, so I think that's a decent place to stop for tonight. We need a villain. We need a bad situation. We need something else to kind of introduce to give ourselves something to fight against. So I think we'll probably try and find those for next week. Sound good? Anyone else have anything they want to add to this as an end before we close the book on this for today?
No, I just think it would be funny if, like, they on their quest into the wilderness, they like happen to cross another Bigfoot.
No,
Say, hey, did you know the Hendersons? Wasn't it? Remember the Bigfoot lived with the Hendersons?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Harry and the Hendersons.
Harry and the Hendersons.
I'm sure they will come up again before the end.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. If you liked this episode, this second part of probably what's going to be a 3-parter, you can let me know at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or at me on Twitter at @getsbettercast. If you didn't like this, please also let me know. I'd love to change it in a way that you would like it, personally. If there's something I can change about this story that would make you like it more, let me know. I love hearing people's suggestions. That's it. That's all I got. So until next time, we'll see you guys later.